I mean, it's a conversation at the end of the day, shifting the conversation around the South African cricket team and that narrative that exists.
These type of conversations are happening in casual commentary at braais at home with people that are just watching the game and those sort of things. And we're wanting to do nothing different than having that same sort of conversation, perhaps just lift the lid somewhat, lift the caliber of the conversation, because we've already peeked behind the curtains or under the covers, if you want to use that term, right?
As soon as you get clear on your motivations and your purpose and your intention, a lot of things can start falling into place.
Yeah.
A lot of things become automated. A lot of things all of a sudden goes, oh, okay, cool, that's how I'm going to do it. So the hows become very clear when the whys are clear.
These guys are hopeful that they're winners. They're not seeing themselves as winners entering it. Despite their having illustrious careers, it's a matter of coming together under the Proteas brand is where things come unstuck in a way.
So the identities of our local cricketing ecosystem has been completely eradicated at a provincial level. There is no longer that sort of, oh, I want to play for this team. Yeah.
It's like taking someone that's not familiar or not comfortable or used to being free and not shown how to handle that freedom. It's the same sort of analogy when we start talking about a playing philosophy of playing with freedom.
All exciting stuff that we're going to get into, right? All exciting stuff that we're going to get into. I'm already salivating a little bit. Right, gents. Excited to having another conversation with the two of you. In particular, and this feels like it feels to me personally like a tricky conversation, right? Because I feel like it's like so in my backyard. And it's a difficult position to be in to potentially unpack something that I could imagine myself in that position, right? And so it feels like I've got to be a little bit more careful. But like I just said to both of you, we're lifting the covers, right? As we're aware, yeah, and it's basically sharing our thoughts and our opinions and our observations, and we know that we could be wrong with some of them, right? And so for this conversation, we're chatting mental performance, or in particular the performance coach role that Tom Dawson-Squibb is currently fulfilling within the national team. One thing that excites me about this is that he seems to be fairly permanent, right? It seems like he's now there, which in the past, it's always been sort of a consultancy sort of role, come in, go out, and who knows, right? He might still be in that capacity, and after this World Cup, he moves on. I don't know. Sorry, any of those details. However, at least it seems like from a Cricket South Africa point of view, there's more emphasis being placed on that this type of role is important. And so I think that's cool. So what I want to maybe just also say at the start is that we're in particular know or have watched an interview that he did with, I don't know actually who. I'll put the link to the video below in the sort of description below, as well as a bit of an article that was written where he got quoted quite a lot in 2017 post the South African team choking essentially. Or again crashing out of a World Cup. And so with that said, Russell, take us away.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. I think I need to also start off by echoing your similar sentiments that this is very much something that's in my backyard. In actual fact, I'm going to say up front, I was shortlisted for the job as well. This is just behind the scenes conversations that I've been having. So, but in saying all of that, I think I want to approach it on the basis of Simon Sinek's, kind of theory of a worthy rival. Simon speaks about not being a competitive with another, but rather looking to see them as someone worthy of comparison, so that you can expose your own weaknesses, vice versa, one to another, and actually collaborate with expansion for excellence and greatness. So from a worthy rival perspective, this is why, I want to state up front that I consider him to be one of a worthy rival, which simply means that we're mutual colleagues, like myself and you, Jody, to be honest. We're in the same backyard ourselves, but we can collaborate on this conversation and bring out far more than what we could do individually, right? And we both grow as a result of it. So I think similarly, we're discussing him today, but the public needs to be aware that it's not a positioning to try and overcome or succumb his type of positioning there, but rather from afar to be a support role to that sort of dynamic, you know. And one of the things that we're doing this for is for the good of the game, really, for the collective good of the game. So he might be currently as the Proteas performance coach for however long, or for a substantial period, whatever his tenure might be. But we're also making contributions from where we are. And that's the objective of coming in and having these conversations. Now, as you just already said, I think the fact that we actually officially have someone there is a feather in the cap for Cricket South Africa, because this is a taboo subject that's a long time coming, that they were kind of avoiding or kind of dismissing in a way for years. And finally, they have someone that can play a role to facilitate the change in guard. So it is a massive, massive elephant in the room. So much so that a lot of South Africa's bombing out failures, you know, of the chokers tag, the emphasis or the overcoming of that tag is now placed heavily and squarely on TDS, Tom Dawson Squib, under his performance coaching role at the Proteas World Cup bid. But the scary thing is, I want to say this, is the fact that we are applauding the fact that he's there, it is also a little bit disconcerting that not much is being said about him. Not much is actually coming out from the media, heightening the fact that he's there and actually playing this role to help the support staff, the coaching staff, and the players actually become champions. No one is saying anything. So it's kind of like this eerie silence, and nothing is being said, you know. So all we really have to go on is our kind of rapport we have with him personally, from what we know him to be, but also some of the things that he's personally put out publicly that we can assess it on. And also the understanding of what's maybe being spoken about from players and people who are there that we are rumoring and hearing about. So some of those things might come up.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the way in which you say all of that, right? And I think those sentiments are echoed by myself. I can't necessarily speak for my Finks, who's also here with us today in this conversation, but I'm sure when he gets his moment, he will sort of say what he needs to say. I think one of the things that's really concerning, and maybe this just follows on the conversation from before, right? One of the things around coaching, right, is the manner in which he got appointed, right? And I referenced this off the interview he did, this YouTube sort of video where he got asked that, right? And sorry, very blasely, it's explained that he saw that Rob Walter was going to be the head coach, and so he reached out to him, you know, and that he had never met him physically until after he was actually appointed. What stands out for me with that in particular is that I think, and these are lessons I've learned as a mental performance coach, say, over the last year and a bit only, is I don't want just a job title, right? I want to know that as the mental performance coach, I'm going to fit into an environment. I'm actually going to be heard. I'm going to be able to influence a way that I believe I can influence, or that I know I can influence. Not even a belief thing, right? That I know this is the way in which I add my value. My voice will be appreciated, acknowledged, accepted within this environment. And so for me, it's that those initial sort of conversations and sort of the speed at which they happened, it feels like it was almost again saying, here's a guy, he's worked with the Heat, Gary Kirsten took him there. He worked at RCB, Gary Kirsten took him there for a week. He worked at the 100, Gary Kirsten took him there. So you know what, he's got some experience. You know, he coaches rugby. We want this rugby thing. So he ticks maybe that box a little bit. We've sort of spoken about all of these things. We've alluded to them in previous conversations. And so he ticks a lot of these boxes, which is great. I mean, I've never had those experiences. I haven't been blessed and privileged enough for people to pull me into places. Maybe a little bit. I've had some. It's not like I haven't had any. And so here's an individual that has reached out on his own. He's put his name in front of us. So let's sort of go with him. That's the impression I got, right? Now, I know that might not be the whole truth, but sort of hearing him explain it, having spoken with you a little bit, And yeah, and so there's a part of that that doesn't sit well with me. There's a part of me as a mental performance coach, knowing how I would go about it. It would be great. You want to offer me this role? I first want to come into environment and see if I actually want to be there. Not be so giddy about myself that I can make this difference in that environment, to the point where I would almost just like, I don't know if I want to say like sell my soul, right? And maybe it's not quite like that, right? But I've heard enough stories from sort of other mental performance coaches that sometimes you just take a job for the sake of having that job, having that title, but you're actually not effective. You can't influence the environment. Your voice is not heard. And so actually end up shooting yourself in the foot, right? And so I don't know if that's happened yet. I've got no idea. But he mentions in that interview that he takes more care of the coaching staff, not really the players. And so then I wonder, well, what's your influence really, right? Because to me, a mental performance coach can influence at a couple of levels within a team. You can influence at the level of team culture, which I think is where Russell's speciality lies in our little group here. With me sort of knowing that that's not my absolute strength, but I can step into that space. I've done it before. And then you can influence at the individual level with the players themselves. Then you can influence systemically the larger organization, which might be beyond the team, and how those relationships get managed and the influence and the effect it has within the team environment. And I think if I ever stepped into a mental performance space with a team, is I would want to know that I can influence all of that. Because if you're not able to influence all of that to some degree or to some capacity, I think the work you do will become fruitless. I think it'll fall on deaf ears. I think it'll be very hit and miss. I think you'll have problems within your teams that you can't actually help solve. And so I think just by the nature of his appointment and where he sort of states he's working and operating, I do question the effectiveness of it and what the effect of that will be down the line in terms of, you see mental stuff, the stuff doesn't work, which tends to be the preconceived idea right out there. Like this role is surplus to the requirements. We don't know why we need this person yet, because they actually don't add that much value. Versus, I think, knowing and understanding for me, how I'd want to be in an environment, and unless I can influence it in the way that I perceive would allow my reputation, or not my reputation, our field of work to gain traction to its importance, I'd want to add to that. Not just necessarily say, oh, well, I want this job because I think I can be cool, and it would look nice on my CV. Not that I know if he's doing all of this, right? But it does come across like that a little bit in that interview. That's what I might take where I'm at with it at this point in time, early in this conversation.
I think what's your first impression as a player, perhaps, for this role, and also perhaps the hearing of this kind of title being associated with the game?
Okay, lovely. So I actually did my bit of research just after the 50 over World Cup, because again, as I said, as a coach, I'm always trying to learn, keep up with the new trends, what's working, and all that stuff. So naturally, since being a player, I always had an interest of every aspect of how I can develop myself, right? Including mentally, because I wasn't a guy who was always, with a franchise. So I had to work things out on my own. I had to watch videos and whatnot. So when I was doing this is now as a coach, I was trying to learn, because South Africa had such a good campaign at the World Cup, in India, the 50 over World Cup. So I said, okay, look, there must be something good that's happening there, So I checked. I was actually driving with my brother, and I listened to the interview where they spoke, to Tom Donson's squib, yes. And my brother asked me, look, is that a Proteas fan? And I said, no, that's the performance coach. He said, oh, okay, because he heard him say that he felt quite fortunate to be with the team, and that took me aback. It reminded me of when I applied for the Northerns coach. This was the last season before we switched from franchises to provincial. And a good friend of mine who's now playing for Cape Cobras, he used to be at Titans. He said, you know what, Muffings, usually these guys who get dropped from the franchise team to the provincial team come with a bit of an ego. How are you going to handle that? So I'm assuming that, he thought that I might maybe feel a bit intimidated if somebody who's played a few one-day internationals comes down. And I said to him, no, look, I'm just there as a coach to create an environment where the player can get the best out of themselves. So even if you were once the world's test number one, if you come with an ego to me or you expect me to see you as a celebrity, you're getting it very wrong. I'm going to immediately tell you that, look, you are here instead of playing in the IPL or for the Proteas because you are not actually as good as what you think you are, or you are off form. I'm just here to help you on that journey, right? So I think sometimes it can be tough because even if you're working at the 100, the 100 is just like very commercial. It's a group of guys from all over the world and we work with them once a year and we leave, you know? But for the Proteas, especially in South Africa's climate, there's a lot. It's like now, Pakistan is not going to be safe for them to land comfortably at their home, at the airport. They're going to face a lot of backlash, right? So it can be quite tough on that. Now, when I read here, because I'm listening to you guys saying he's working more with the coaching staff, but in the 2017 article that I read, it said that, it speaks quite highly of him, and I'm sure he's a very good man. I mean, I listened to the things, but that he's worked with elite athletes, not elite coaches, elite athletes in Super Rugby, the Premier Soccer League, and elite golfers, not golf coaches, and elite tennis players, not tennis coaches. And that for him, the tag choke is a misnomer and is too simplistic a phrase. He's quite correct with that, right? But going down on the article, he speaks about confidence, the importance of confidence. And I think that's a word we overuse in South Africa. So we often think, okay, as a mental performance coach, I'm there to just increase confidence. Confidence is important, by the way, right? But there's something else. So if you had to choose between a guy with confidence, which is a red pen, and a guy with self-esteem, the one that you actually want is not necessarily the one with confidence. You want self-esteem. I'll tell you why. Confidence is a variable. So that's why when we win by a narrow margin, we say we'll take the confidence out of that. You understand? Confidence is a variable. So a lot of the people we drive past on the street, we say, sir, can I have 5 rand? And we say, no, get away. If that guy wins the lotto, the next day he's going to tell you, who the hell are you? Whatever you've got, I've also got. So now his confidence has gone up because something changed in his life, a variable, a result changed. You understand? Self-esteem, on the other hand, is more deep-rooted. It doesn't depend on an outcome. Self-esteem means that even if I'm unemployed, even if I'm coaching this team, even if I'm not coaching this team, even if I coach under 11s, even if I coach the women's team, I'm still the same person. And it alludes a lot to what the two of you speak about, am I a winner generally? So Glenn Maxwell and David Warner, they don't need confidence. They have no confidence from the IPL. But they have self-esteem, which is more deep-rooted. That's why Australia still said, look, Fraser McGurk has confidence right now because of the conditions in the IPL as well. Those are good batting conditions. We don't know if his confidence was going to be the same in the Caribbean against 5 spinners from Afghanistan. You see? So because cricket is a conditions game, right? Confidence is too developed based on results. So if you are a batter, your confidence would be high in the IPL. If you're a seam bowler, your confidence is high in America. If you're a spin bowler, your confidence is high in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You understand? But the self-esteem is developed over long periods. And that's why Jody spoke about, we don't just want to work with a squad 2 months before they go somewhere. Or we have a quick camp before that's not going to help. We need to develop an entire package over a long period of time because self-esteem is more important or more valuable. Both of them are important, but self-esteem's weight is worth more than confidence because confidence is a variable, right? So that to me is about what we need to be offering to the players. You understand? Because if I work with a coach, but it's irrelevant. That coach still needs to direct that message to his actors because they're the ones on the movie day when the director says start, 3, 2, 1, let's go. The actors, there's nothing me as a coach can do for my players once they're out there. But I need to build self-esteem so that even if somebody's not necessarily in good form, like our Proteas were not in good form with the bat. But guess what, boys? Those conditions were tough. Because remember in cricket, the conditions are a leveler. The more we play in good batting conditions, the more the better team actually emerges. Because your bowling attack will also have the skill. But when we play on bowling conditions, suddenly the toss and one or two things can really change the game around, you know. So I think we need to move from words, whether it's from the captain or the coach or a performance analyst, where we speak a lot about confidence. Let's speak about something deeper, which is self-esteem. You know, that's that from now, and then I'll catch on with you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, Russell?
Yeah, thanks. I think you reminded me of, you know, when you talk about having also the impact, Jody, you also referred to the impact that you might have when you're entering the spaces. I'm just aware of you entering it and having the self-assurance, self-confidence in yourself walking in, because I can recall for myself walking into the Royals change room as an example, and needing to present, you know, to them, not a prescriptive thing, but something that is a collaborative thing where the answers lie in the floor with everyone contributing, right? Now, bear in mind, we have Josh Butler in the room, Owen Morgan, and another World Cup winner, Jason Roy. So we have three Englishmen in the room who have just basically won or have come off victories and having won World Cups. And here I'm standing as this performance catalyst for this Royals team, which was just a brand new team, right? So if you do not have that self-esteem that you're speaking about, and you're just operating on confidence, you would probably succumb and look at these guys in a hero worship fashion and want to take dictatorship from them and not have a firm grasp on what you're all about, right? Now, I said all of that in that if you don't come into the room knowing what you have to offer, like Jody, you were mentioning earlier, if you don't know how you can influence and play a part in helping someone be their best versions of themselves and make their contributions, right? What is it at this point in time that life has surrendered or flowed in such a way that makes you the credible source of someone else's influence in a positive direction? Is the alignment of things coming together that it's not basically a mismatch and something that's going to blow out in a sense? Is it really truly a matter of the collision of two masters coming together and actually creating greatness, right? That's really the question marks you have to ask yourself. So this is why I often wonder if this approach, I've heard it once said from a coach where he said, I'm definitely an high-profile coach in Russell Domingo, actually said this to me when he was way young in his career, saying back to me, Russ, I'm going to die young, right? And I said, why you say that? Because life has become too easy. Things have come his way too easy. This is his own self-admission, right? And if you don't do the hard yards and earn the ropes or learn things that builds the self-esteem, what will happen is when things just come your way in an easy fashion, you sometimes feel like you're an imposter, that you come into the room and you have to masquerade as if you have the answers. And if you come across as an advisory type of persona as well, who are you to presume that you could be telling World Cup winners how to be winning World Cups or people at that caliber? It's automatically going to create a tension because the players would know it as well as you would know it, as well as the supporting staff that you're there for, that you're there to support, right? So you were speaking about the sounding board. What is it that you bring in that's so unique that's actually going to trigger this thing? That's come, by the way, not the other day. It's probably come way too early, from 1991 already, probably, before we even attempted to go do a World Cup. In the 92 World Cup, this thing has started in a sense, because we're chasing this pot of gold and we're not looking at the deeper things and not answering those fundamental stuff right. And therefore, so Tom comes around the other day, and it's not his fault. It's the problem and the systemic problem of how he's chosen. Rob Walter was given full rights to choose this. Why did he choose someone who hasn't got the scope to answer this deep-seated problem that's come for years? Does Tom really have the answer? Just because he's involved necessarily with rugby and rugby's been proficient? So those are some of the question marks that we have around this. Is it the right person for the right time? Is it master hitting master and greatness is about to happen? Or is it a mismatch and a mistake made? You know, because if you look credibly as you see, you spoke about him going around the world with, or going around the circuits with Gary Kirsten. None of those times have actually proved to be successful, by the way. Just because you're naming the Durban Heat or you're naming wherever he was, Bangalore. Actual fact, Bangalore RCB was the worst time, and Gary got fired as a result of that. And he only spent a month, I think, according to his own admission, on this video, or a week, or I can't even remember how much it was. So it's not like you can really make a difference with the time you spent there, right? So don't claim that you have these, exposures and you've made a difference when you haven't. And that realness is necessity for going into the job and feeling like you're worthy of actually making a contribution that's going to move things positively forward, right? So this is why the question mark about how much esteem, self-esteem does he really have coming in, or is it just bravado? And when he does these videos, as an example, is it basically just a brag swag attempt at saying, look at me, I'm there. Sorry for the rest of you, but I've made it because I was bold enough to make a call to Rob based on my association with Gary, which was touch and go here and there. And we're basically going to be hope for the best, and I can look and come out sweetly.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a part of the interview that sort of really stands out for me, where he talks about the guy that interviews him. I think his name's Ryan. Interviews him and asks him, so how did you do this? Like, what was that first session or that first contact point with the team like? And I think what concerns me a little bit is how Tom sort of speaks about that he's been doing this for 16 years. So 16 years, if I say, give me the 10-year journey, is more than that, right? And then by his own admission, he says, but I came in too hot, without understanding and listening, etc. I kind of wanted to just walk in and do my thing, and that was maybe something that I shouldn't have done. And that concerns me. It concerns me because the mental performance role or the performance coaching role is very much one of understanding. It's very much one of asking questions over anything else. And I think by his own admission in the interview, he sort of says, well, he got there and that him and Rob sort of looked at each other and they didn't really know what to do. And then he just backed himself and he did his thing, right? And his thing was to get the players to speak with each other. What doesn't sit well for me is there's no basis for that, right? I think interventions in any way, shape or form, any coaching intervention, it's like saying, well, I arrive at the net and I'm going to throw balls to a cricketer. I must coach him. It's a new client privately, or it's a new team I'm coaching. And you know what? I'm just going to do with them what I want to do, right? I'm just going to start working on their contact points. Like, I think for me, no coach worth their salt, really, really worth their salt would do that. Coaches worth their salt would go, okay, cool. Let me see. Let me look. Let me try and understand. Let me go look at last season's performances. Let me go see how this player got out. Let's go have a conversation. Let's go drink a coffee. Let me try and understand you first before I just chuck a bunch of stuff, or before I do something which might be great kumbaya, but it's not necessarily hitting the mark. It's not towards something. It's not towards an outcome that we're driving towards. It's not towards some purpose. It's not to shift intentionally a team from one place to another. It's not to raise an awareness of some kind that, hey, are we aware that as a team we're doing this thing? So I'm going to do this activity. Why? Because I need us to realize that we're stuffing this thing up in some way. And so it doesn't feel like it was well thought out. It feels like it was a bit rushed. And hey, maybe things have settled down. Maybe it's calmed down. I mean, we don't know, right? We don't know what's happening there. We don't know the influence. I'm going by what I've seen in a video. And it sort of, it worries me that if as CSA we're saying this role is important, that it was so rushed. If this role is this important that we feel there's a need for our system to have this type of person within this role with certain skills and abilities and capacities, it feels like it's the same. It's here's a person with some celeb status, as we said in our previous thing, because there's some nice things on the CV that get ticked off. Let's go, like let's pick this person. And you know what? If that's how the system does it, then that's how the system does it. And then I think the system will keep getting what the system gets, right? Insanity is doing the same things over and over again, expecting different results. And so I think the system is not taking a long enough and a hard enough look at itself. And if I say the system, yeah, I mean the board, the executive, the CEO, the people in the positions of power that make decisions around processes that should deliver excellence at the end of the day. That system, I don't think, is doing that. It feels iffy. It feels sort of window dressing, like we've said before. And I think this whole sort of explanation that we hear him give is just another example of that. You know, he's got, by his own admission, standing in the nets like this, awe of where he's at, right? Oh, geez, I'm here, and these guys are bowling at me, and it's just so phenomenal. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's befitting of a person that's supposed to be in a position empowered enough to influence the character of a Rabada, to influence and to speak into the mind and the heart potentially of a Quinton de Kock. If you sound like you are hero worshipping them, you know, I don't know. Like I'm sitting at a difficult position with that, because it could also just be an interview that's in isolation, that's playing out like that. I'm very much aware that could be it, right? That it's not his essence or his nature or how he sort of is in that environment. But in his own words, in that interview, it comes across as that, you know, for me, in any case, by my understanding. Any comments, gents?
Yes, sir. When I looked at it, right, so I'm trying to think, what is it that makes the process so rushed? And again, sometimes the system puts us under pressure. So the system says, Jody, come quickly now. We're going to India in 2 weeks' time. Come and play this role for us for the World Cup. So it can push you to become so results-orientated that you almost feel like you don't have time to first get to know the players, right? And here's the beauty of this kind of stuff, of coaching, whether you're doing mental coaching or whatever, it's supposed to be an entire package. So the beauty of it is that players have different characters, like you've said now, right? That means that some players might be more open to having a conversation with you and being vulnerable, and others might not. So you've got to be able to quickly assess which stage of change are they at, you know? Again, in the previous talk, I spoke about helping people to change. But when they help people to change in psychology, they speak about the stages of change. So they speak about pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. At pre-contemplation, the person is afraid. They're not vulnerable. So if you tell them, do you know what, quit smoking cigarettes, it's going to cause cancer, they say, hey, back off, it's my life. You know, we're all going to die anyway. But at contemplation stage, they see at least one benefit, but they're afraid. And often they're afraid of what other people are going to think. Or that if I try what Jody's saying, I might get beaten for 10 runs and over. So at that point, the athlete is still, he sees or she sees the benefit in what you're saying, but they're still afraid of change, right? Then preparation is when the athlete makes a decision and says, you know what, you're right. I need to change this habit. I need to quit the habit. Then action is when we've embarked on the journey, and maintenance is when that journey has become a habit of ours for the last 6 or so months. So at pre-contemplation, you only give information and back off. So I can't force you to listen to me or join the exercise. I just give information and back off. But at preparation, if the player says, you know what, that's easier said than done. It's not easy when I'm out there. Then I can sense that, okay, they see at least one benefit of what I'm saying, but they're still afraid that what if they try what I'm saying and it goes wrong? At that point, you only discuss the benefits and the disadvantages of the new thing that I'm suggesting. And then at preparation stage is when the player says, Jodes, I'm out of form. What do you advise me to do? Like Dinesh Karthik, when he went to Abhishek Nair, he said, boss, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't buy a run. At that point, the player wants the change. So now you start to discuss with them the options. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's try this. And then the action is when now the players. So without being too long-winded, I think I don't want to be too harsh on him because I don't know him personally. But I also am trying to look at how many months prior to the World Cup was his appointment and what influence did that have on him having the time to settle in. And then lastly, if he phoned and said, you know what, I'd like to do this, and then he got the gig mainly because of that phone call, Do you know if some person who works for the ANC gives, what do they call it, cadre deployment to some other guy in the township, Jabulani or whatever, and they say, Jabulani phoned us and said he's an engineer. Let's give him this cadre deployment to become the Minister of Health. We will quickly raise our hands and say that that's nepotism. Or in labor law, they'll say that there's at least a perceived bias, even if it's not necessarily an actual bias. You know, so in terms of the employment, if that was an employment to be an engineer or a doctor at a hospital, and the doctor says, well, I got this job by phoning the head of HR, and they said to me, you know what, come, let's do the interview, without advertising it. I'm talking now in the legal aspect and in other aspects. So I know there's a fine line of, look, the system after the SJN said, look, we don't want anybody pointing fingers at anyone else. We're going to let the coaching staff decide who they want. So maybe in sport, it's a bit fluid. But again, it speaks to what I'm saying, that how many people are being overlooked subconsciously. So it's a matter of we're advertising this job, but we've already decided that we want Jody here. So anyone else who applies, they might as well stop applying. We've already decided on Jody. What does that do? Doesn't that limit us from seeing what else is possible out there? Whereas in India, they tell you that, hey, guess what? We had this and that opening better, and this guy just came out of nowhere and said to us, oh, are these your best bowlers? I think I can bowl. How many guys got picked for teams who were just net bowlers? You see? But if that guy was sick that day, if Ngaba Peter was sick and he had a stomach bug and couldn't bowl at the Proteas net, would Paul Royals have known about him? Would the Proteas and Gauteng Lions have known about him? Maybe not. So we need to now start doing things beyond who we know, because if we don't have the courage to go from that limited awareness, you know, so there's contracted awareness, expanding awareness, and pure awareness. Contracting awareness is like when I poke and go, ouch. With contracting awareness, it builds only on the box. You only think within the box, you know. But with expanded awareness, you think broader than the box. You listen to your intuition. You are more open-minded. And then pure awareness is at the highest level. It's when we say, okay, everything we're doing now is out of love. So we're going to make this open to seeing how many other people can become a fit. Because he's from rugby and he worked with Gary Kirsten. But what if somebody who's from netball also worked with some other team in Al Ahly in Egypt, who are very successful, by the way? What if someone else worked with another team that might not be known, but it's King Edward School? How many times do we, if we look at the Proteas, it appears that actually our best batters are actually from these schools. So what if our best batting coach is somebody from a school? It's not necessarily somebody who went with someone who's coaching Rajasthan Royals or whatever. You understand what I'm saying? So if I had to be critical, I would say that it appears in legalese language that there is a perceived bias. It doesn't mean that there was a bias, but it can be perceived to be a bias, you know? So that's all I'm going to say for this time around. I think that you and Russell have got a lot more capacity.
I think the real contention really is the manner in which it's come about. There's a principle that suggests the way you start something and the way you sustain it. And I think TDS under this role is dead in the water already, in my view, the way he was appointed. Because he's appointed in such a fashion that he was, you know, it came too easy. There was no real kind of interrogation or scrutiny on that role. And so therefore the belittling from, call it CSA, DOC, head coach, whoever made those decisions, they belittled the role and therefore they didn't think too highly of the job. So it was like a casual appointment of something that they didn't really buy into, but it was already announced. So as a result of it, they had to follow through on it. So it made almost in a sense like, oh, we have to now go with it because we made a call, we made a public statement, so people are going to be asking about it. So he's dead in the water already. So it doesn't matter how effective of a performance coach he could have been. The fact the way he was appointed is already crippling his chances of having any form of success. So therefore, that nuances come through, the subtleties of that come through with the support staff and the crew. Even the players would know that. They would be asking questions and everyone would kind of just be dismissive of it. So it's a little bit unfair on him. Never mind the fact that he himself probably would have, I put his hand up and very excitedly wanted to take the gig, because essentially people often say this: why would I say no if someone offers me something like that? I think it's actually more serious for you to say yes for your own career pathway if you're not suited and it's not coming in the right way, than for you to actually say no. I mean, sorry, yes to the role, right? You know what I'm trying to say. So I once spoke to Colin Ingram. I'm just using an example, for instance. We were in the lift and Colin was playing in this Champions League thing. Colin Ingram was chosen and selected to represent the Proteas. And in that lift, because I know him very well, and I knew where his game was at, and I said to him, because this is the first time hearing that he's actually been selected to be for the for the Proteas touring, and I said to him, my deepest condolences, because him and his fiance was in the lift, and his eyes lit up like that, and he's like, "What? Well, why would you say that?" I said, "Because I'm not sure you're ready, and that space is not ready for you either, because the grounded type of individual that you are and where you are within your game, that space is going to corrupt you." And I don't necessarily see you making a difference, and you're not necessarily effective or capacitated to be effective for that space. So to choose someone prematurely is actually does them a disservice. And I think in this regard, there's an obvious injustice and indictment that someone is given the credibility of being able to go into a space like that, a high-performing environment, where he hasn't actually had his dues and he hasn't actually accomplished anything that justifies his appointment there. But it's second to it, the fact that they relegated the role in itself, and like, oh, I need to go with this now all of a sudden. Let me choose someone that I know, a friend of mine that's possibly going to swing back at me. Because let's be frank, Tom Dawson-Corb is aligned with Gary Kirsten, and Gary Kirsten will be mates with Rob Walter. So if Rob loses his job one day, TDS will find himself with Rob somewhere, or Gary somewhere, or Gary will maybe invite Rob in another gig. Those are the type of things that are happening, and those are some of the injustices that keep prevailing, and why we have SJN hearings, and nothing gets done about those SJN hearings until people decide to publicly say enough is enough. Those sorts of things need to be resolved, because you need to really, if you're going to truly look on merit, instead of just what Mafinki was just referring to there now, adding kind of this cognitive sense of, no, I got an alignment with you and it's going to benefit. Those are some of the things that are keeping the game from progressing towards greatness, because we're using spaces for self-promotion, for experience for one's own brand and own career, and for the betterment or for the sacrifice of others, and for the real benefit that it can have for others. So those are some of the things that are at play here. And I find it is unfair on certain individuals, in particularly Tom, to be fast-tracked into that, similar to a JP Duminy to be fast-tracked into the national spaces, because they haven't done the business, and I don't necessarily see them necessarily having the answers to be that silver bullet answer for South Africa's biggest problem, which is the choker stag. The choker stag is not lying with Jody Martins or Russel Aspeling or Nkululeko Sarame. It's not with one individual and one performance coach. There have been tons of mental conditioning coaches over the years, and we hear nothing of them ever, because none of them got it right. We had the biggest players in the world, and none of them got over the line, right? The answer lies in teaming well together. Everyone makes a collective contribution. It's not going to be a matter of the brightness or the advisory capacity of an individual. It's going to allow the respected contributions from everyone sitting around the table and saying, we need to factor these things in, because this is clearly pointing to how we feel this thing is unfolding in our day-to-day realities. So until we get to that point, someone like TDS is a misappointment. It's a complete misappointment. Unfair on him and unfair on the Proteas at their bid here, because they really could have done something differently, but they have the wrong approach to it, and therefore they've sabotaged themselves.
Mm. What I'm almost hearing you say there is, if CSA was really serious about this role, what they would most probably do, or could do, is to say, right, we got to figure this thing out. We got to figure this thing out. Let's get the experts together. Let's pull in a Nkululeko. I think he worked with a team back in the day. He's more in rugby, but he worked with a team at some point in time. Let's get a Ken Jennings who's worked with the South African cricket team on this exact thing. Let's get in there's one more, Paddy Upton. Let's get in a Jody. Let's get in a Russell. Let's get in a Tom. You know what? Actually, there's one or two others that work in other sports in our country. I've got their names on. I can happily suggest them. They can be part of this conversation. Let's have a 3-day workshop where we go sit around a table and we just brainstorm this thing. And as a collective, we try and figure out every angle to this thing. Like, what is it? How does it live and breathe? Where does it come from? And what are the steps going forward that we've got to start implementing now? And maybe it means that a couple of these people that's sitting in this room becomes then part of that solution. Maybe they go work with all the under 13 cricketers in the country and we start teaching them some basic principles about ourselves and our esteem. And maybe that's what it means, right? That there is more a concerted effort, that if you're saying this area, this field of work is important, that you treat it as something important, that you treat it as the thing, as the game changer that it could be. And you don't just pin it on one person and one individual to go make the difference in a rushed, unplanned, unstructured sort of a way. Maybe it means that you go and say, well, everybody says the mental game is important. You ask a lot of people, they'll say it's 90% of the game. Personally, I don't think it's that much. Could be for some individuals, but as a generalization, maybe it's not quite like that. Like I think said in the previous conversation, if you don't got the skill, we're not going anywhere, right? So we tend to focus on that first. However, I have a disagreement with my fix on that from the previous conversation, in that I believe the mental game is number one. And we'll always say the nutritionist will say the nutrition is number one. Everybody, I'll stand up for my field and say mental game is number one. Because if you throw a ball to a 6-year-old and they don't think that they can, and you throw a ball to a 6-year-old and they think that they can, immediately those two skills start developing differently, right? It is the crux of the matter. It is, in my mind, the most important part. And if we think that, and if we say to ourselves that it is, then it needs to get the time, the bandwidth, the space, not just at the top level, at all the levels, so that maybe a Tom at the end of the day can stand at that top level and really work with athletes, right? In the way that he can work with athletes and optimize and get the best out of them, because the athletes and the cricketers that are in that space, it's not like, who's this person? It's like, no, this is part of what we're doing, right? Because there's been this effort to make this part of every level, to bring the solution across the spectrum and not just at the top end with a select few, in the hope of achieving something, and only in the name of then expanding those people's celeb status, their next steps beyond whatever this might be. But that it's an actual effort to make a difference across the system. Russell?
Yeah, I think also I just wanted to highlight the fact that we basically try to avoid having these conversations because it could be misleading or misinterpreted. People could assume that we are talking, against particularly Tom, as we said. I'm just reiterating that. But in this regard, we were compelled to come on and talk about this because there's every chance that if they fail at the World Cup, that CSA could just turn around and say, oh, we tried that and it didn't work. So therefore, this type of important and critical work gets relegated one more time to the background and almost said, let's just bury this and never, ever go back to it. So we almost had to come back onto this conversation and address it directly. Otherwise, it will be kind of dismantled to be, no, it's not something that's worth effort. Because for jocks or for cricketers or people who just want to think bat and ball, these type of things are they're unaware, the abstract nature of things. They tend to want to dismiss it entirely, and it's not real, or there's a lot of myths around it. So as a result of it, this is something that they would personally avoid. And for the most part, this is the thing that consistently comes up at World Cup, because it's these things that causes us to choke, and yet we are not looking into it. And yet we are saying we want this win, particularly by the 2027 World Cup. And what you're doing now, the way you started it, is not guaranteeing a successful moving or progression towards a sustainability or the surety of being able to grab that cup in 2027.
Yeah, agree. And Nkululeko.
Yes, thank you. So I agree with what yourself and Russell are saying, that look, this is being highlighted by us because often something has to be the scapegoat, right? So if we don't achieve our goals, then suddenly people say, well, Afghanistan or whoever won the World Cup without a mental coach, so this means it's not necessary, you know? But nobody says that actually, what if it's because we didn't have a spin coach at the World Cup? You know, why is spin bowling not important? But now here's why what Jody said is so important, Russ, right? I want you to think of the word skills in cricket. Many people think skills are only technical. So when we think of skills, we think about can you bowl the away swinger, the Yorker, whatnot. So skills, I'm gonna equate that word with talent. So talent, or your ability to bowl and bat and field, is a skill, but it's a physical skill. So a blind person can not see you hit the ball, you see, because it's a physical skill. But guess what? There are also inner skills. Inner skills is your self-esteem, your courage. That's your heart. How much passion. And if you look at Afghanistan's players, they've got heart. They've got courage. Even Bangladesh, right? So those guys are very hard characters. Even the United States, believe it or not, right? But it's also your brain, your ability to keep your emotions calm, to think clearly under pressure and whatnot. So the red pen is the talent, is the physical skill. The blue pen is the inner skills, your heart and your brain, right? I can take a player, because I still maintain you still need to have some level of skill, right? So I can take a player, nobody has 100% talent. So let's take AB de Villiers and Virat Kohli. Let's say they're above 90%, right? But if that player's inner skills, their heart and their mind, is below 70%, they ain't going to make it. You see? But I can take a player with talent that is 68%, like Alistair Cook or Graham Smith. But because his inner skills, his heart and his brain is above 90%, they can still average 15 test cricket. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why I'm saying that the coaching philosophy in South Africa, people think, I got my level 3 or my level 4. This means I can now become the Titans coach. So they say, okay, come on, let's bomb them out. Or let's practice our Yorkers, let's practice our slower balls. That is important. But what about the inner skills of cricket? That's now does it start to make sense? The puzzle pieces are fitting in why I said that your ability to play cricket at the highest level has got very little to do with your ability to coach. Because Bangladesh's players, if we all did a level 3 course and they demonstrated the cover drive, they can all do it. Nepal's players can also demonstrate the pull shot and the slower ball and whatnot. The difference at a particular level is not necessarily the physical skill. It's the inner skills. It's your ability to still stay calm, make clear decisions and whatnot. So I'm saying this because I don't want the system to underrate the value of people who are mental performance coaches. You know, it's so important that in tennis, Coco Gauff in 2019, I think she was 16 or 17 years old. She beat Serena Williams in 2019. And the interviewer after the match said, wow, you've just beaten a legend. Were you not nervous? She said, you know what? I was very nervous. But I quickly remembered that the painted line stays the same. Whether it's the tennis court at home, whether it's the public facilities tennis court, or whether it's Wimbledon or whatever, the tennis court stays the same. So therefore, I need to stay calm. And the most relevant information is not that it's Serena Williams on the other end. It's me executing my skills. So that's the value of the mental skills. And I'm passionate about this because there are so many people I grew up with in my township who, pound for pound, looking back now, I'm like, damn, that guy was talented. You know, but he went to a school where the coaching quality is not good. There wasn't a high performance environment, you know, and that's why when I mentioned that I approached Northwest CEO in 2022 in January, he just blue ticked my messages saying to him, sir, here's my CV, let's just have a chat. Let's build a high performance academy. I will drive the philosophy behind it. So I'll get mental coaches, I'll get nutritionists, I'll get fitness trainers, I'll get bowling coaches, and we'll make it an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary center where we produce you good players. I'll go around the townships and look for them so that you have your own players. You don't need to buy people from Gauteng or wherever else, from KwaZulu-Natal. So that vision wasn't seen. So coaching going forward should be multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary that has a teaming aspect of it, so much that you shouldn't feel like an imposter. Once you've done your job and it's match day, why must you feel like, damn, I've got nothing to do now, they're at the nets? You are actually right. At the nets, it's about the physical skills and then how they apply the mental skills they've learned from you. So at the nets, you just observe. Remember I said helping people to change. There's a part where you give information and you back off. You let them participate in their own learning. So if yourself or Jody are the mental coaches, on nets training day, you sit back and you observe them. Then together with the coach, if I'm the coach, I say to you, okay, let's look at Gerald, Protea, or whoever he's practicing his Yorkers. Let's just keep quiet and let him participate in his learning. Only afterwards we can call him and say, okay, Gerald, what were you thinking there? And he might say, there, I tried to go for a wide Yorker, but that's why I've got a deep point and I've brought someone from the leg side up. So then we know that, look, he might get it wrong. That's okay, but at least he was clear on his thinking, you know. So skills are not only physical. They are also inner skills, or what we call intangible, the non-tangible skills, or the abstract skills. Is your courage, your self-esteem, your bravery, your intelligence, your ability to think quickly. Because at a high level, cricket is basics happening at a fast speed. So it's your ability to think when things are happening quickly. You know, that ball comes out of Rashid Khan's arms. You need to quickly know, is that a googly or is it a leg spin? And you need to make a decision quickly. That's why I've got such high respect for those guys who are playing there, because they are able to perform against high quality, but now we need to take it a level up mentally so that they make the best decisions when there's everything happening around you. 2 more overs left. You need so many runs. Somebody needs to bowl the last over. Somebody got injured. That sort of stuff. So I'm pleading with the system, if somebody from them hears this, it's still important. Just like if the team wins or doesn't lose a World Cup. That's why in the previous session, I said Sachin Tendulkar only has 1 World Cup is won, right? So if the team doesn't win a World Cup, does that mean that we're not allowed to have a batting coach anymore? Or we're not allowed to have a bowling coach? So if this team doesn't do well, to be fair to Tom, does that mean that we shouldn't have a mental performance or a performance coach anymore? You understand? But on the other side of the coin, systemically, Tom now has it on his shoulders to say to the system, look, guys, I'm an individual. Why don't we rather get more people on board? Let's create more spaces on the merry-go-round so that they make my job easier when the player comes to the top team. You understand? So I'm hoping that this message reaches both the ears and that the ears are not deaf. Thank you.
Russell?
I think it's a perfect ending there, my friends, because I was going to refer to the siloed attempts when you know, Jody, you mentioned all the names earlier that could possibly contribute around, you know, in a round table dynamic where we're brainstorming and we're kind of unpacking and dismantling this thing and refashioning it, right? So the scary thing is, though, that for the most part, we have this competitive nature, even with ourselves, where we kind of push back, and we demonstrating by coming together and putting our heads together that this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow this conversation and the circle a little bigger. Because I've just recently sent you guys, I think it was in today that I sent you a LinkedIn post from Paddy Upton, for instance, as an example. And I follow Paddy Upton, but the numerous times that I've commented on his thing and with no response, right? So that's indicative of how the silo barrier type of, you know, protecting my own space and survival of the fitness mentality instead of what's best for all is kind of perpetuated. And that's what the system has done. And we kind of buy into that the whole time. So for me, when I answered his post and I referred back or I reposted it, the objective for that was to kind of put more heads together to maybe get a little bit deeper on it. So what you just referred to now, my things, was actually posted by Paddy as an example. Recently, he was referring to a tennis player, Djokovic, which actually said that he don't buy into the affirmations, right? The positive reaffirmations. He doesn't buy into that type of lingo. We spoke about this before, Jody. We know all about the affirmations. It basically asserts that you don't actually have the means to handle the situation. So therefore, you lose control emotionally and mentally because you lose the point, and you have to quickly find a way to get out of that mental slug of a space, right? And he refers to it loosely as the ability to get out. Now, that's where our work lies. It's for helping players find that ability to bounce back and to come back, right? And this is what traditional technical coaches or tactical coaches kind of just say, no, the players, you can sort this out for yourself and hopefully you can find your way. But the reality is, if world-class players like Djokovic can say he's human just like anyone else is, as these big champions can go through that, then the quicker way you can get that ability to bounce back and we can assist you with that, then we're going to find championship experiences more often. Now, the thing is, when you face certain problems that you've just succumbed to, and you don't guide a person to actually have that well of reserves, the fact that you have the capacity to bounce back, that's where we're talking about. This goes against what I said earlier. Everything in South African cricket is all up and to the right. Everything is made easier for you. So therefore, we'll be conditioned to just give us this red carpet and things are easily done for us. Even if we lose, we're still going to get all our salaries. We're still going to get paid this commercial rights fee from the World Cup. We're still going to come back, face the heat once off, but we still have illustrious careers that's going to continue. But we're not really addressing this ability to bounce back from struggles because we're giving it too easy to people, right? And for the moment, this trending reality of just make it easy for us so that we can go do it for you is a fallacy. The tougher we live our lives day to day and we buy into that we can grit through it, the easier it's going to be when we're standing in the middle needing to score 10 of whatever, right? Of the last over. Those type of situations should be just normal life portraying itself through the game where we have the talent and the inner well of reserves to bounce back and to come back and overcome. But we don't necessarily focus that sternly on it. And as a result, guys like Paddy stick to themselves and they promote themselves and jump from one gig to the next gig to the next gig. And we don't share this pool of intellect and resources and grow South Africa, the ecosystem of cricket and the global game. We have no impact because everyone stands there and then takes next gigs and the next gigs and then puts the next guy in that needs to learn from scratch and not from each other collectively. And that is the indictment on the system.
And that is why we're having these conversations. I think for people who don't know, who've maybe not followed all of these conversations to this point, that is exactly why Russell and I started this, in part, right? Is to say that he's got some info, I've got some info. And through our conversations, we had a realization that we've got this other person that's in our network that we need to tap into, Russel and Nkululeko, you know, and it's in part, right? So in as much as this conversation is like really locked in and honed in and zoned in on the role that Tom plays as the performance coach in the Proteas environment, and as much as we've maybe highlighted some things that we notice in him, and as much as we've highlighted from that what we think the system, what the system's part is that it's played in that, the whole purpose of this is not to point the finger. The whole purpose of this is to open up the conversation to say, like, what is actually happening, right? And how can we all play a part in making sure that what happens is happening in the name of excellence, not in the name of window dressing, not in the name of just getting the next person up there to look good and feel good about themselves, to just say like, hey, we've got this nice person here that we think knows what something, you know, or it's more the personality that matters or the celebrity status of the individual that matters than it is actually the doing of the work. And so I want to encourage Tom, and I want to encourage anybody else that has an opinion on this matter, wherever we got it wrong, wherever we fucked it up, excuse my language, wherever we have it twisted, you know, like, raise your voice and let's get together and hash it out, because that is the purpose here. The purpose is not that we have all the answers and that we can tell it like it is. The purpose is to say, this is what we think, this is what we're getting, this is what we understand based on our understanding. And if we've got it wrong, well, let's go. Let's have it. Let's have it at it. Come show us the difference. Come teach us. Come educate us, you know. And if we have it right, well, then let's have a conversation about how we can implement that a bit better and how we can enhance that and how we can have more of that going around rather than shutting down and being overprotective and so protective of our own egos, you know. And so, Russell, you said something there towards the back end. I don't buy into this idea of that we need the resilience, right? I think struggle is everywhere. And I know I'm disagreeing with you maybe a little bit on this, but it's good, right? It's good to have disagreement. I have an understanding about life. I'm not even talking about elite performance here, right? Life, that there's struggle in life, that there is tough in life. And then we can choose. Am I choosing resilience as my solution to that? In other words, when these struggles, I think the word you used was grit, right? And I don't disagree. I think from tough things, we develop character and we build these things and we know we can get through it and all of that. But and maybe you have the intention in the same way, and maybe I misunderstand it a little bit because I know you sort of want to wrap up the conversation, right? But it's pushed my button, right? And so I think there's this idea for me that even though there's struggle, even though there's difficulty, even though that is super powerful in creating excellence, right? There's this book, Rasmus and Ankerson, I think, wrote it, The Goldmine Effect. And he went to 6 places around the world there where elite athletes come from. And it's like the gym is a bent bar with paint cans filled with concrete. The tennis courts are falling to pieces. The tracks that these athletes are training on are burnt and it's falling to pieces, right? Yet they produce excellence. And so this idea that you speak about, that we get things too easy, it resonates really well with me. I think where I differ with you slightly is our response to that. It's the nature of our response. To me, it doesn't have to be resilience. To me, it can be, if you speak with elite athletes at any given point in time, when they explain themselves at their best, it was in spite of the struggle, in spite of the difficulty, in spite of the magnitude of the challenge, in spite of all of that, they managed to find calm, peace, a deep level of focus. And so I think that's where we miss the trick for me, is that we make it about our resilience, where that is not excellence. That's not the message that excellence sends if you listen to what athletes describe as themselves being at their best. The message that they send is, in spite of all the challenges, in spite of being in front of a stadium of 60,000 people, where everything was on me, needing to win, needing to step up, I didn't feel the need to become resilient. I felt that I could find my peace. And so if you listen to sort of Djokovic quite a lot, he refers to that, actually. Now, I don't know who the person is that he worked with. I don't know who taught them this. Maybe it's through his own discovery. Maybe he had a very specific person. Maybe it's just a coach that's interested in this sort of stuff, that taught him about breathing, that taught him about being present, that taught him about that none of this other stuff that we can worry about actually matters. All that matters is you hitting the next ball, right? Who knows where he got it from? But I think he's a great example of somebody that isn't resilience. That is not the driver or the focus. It is find my peace, find my calm, access my best, right? And the pushback, resilience to me is a pushback to the struggle. It's saying, well, I know we got the struggle, but and we're going to grit our way through it. Where I think excellence actually comes when we can relax in spite of the struggle, and we can focus in spite of that struggle. We can face with it. It can be there. Okay, well, great. We got this choking tag hanging over our head. Okay, great. There it is. Let's go. We can breathe out. We can be calm. We can be at peace with what we do and how we do it. I think there's a lot to be said to develop and enhance that ability in individuals, right? We talk about mental skills. That ability to step into what can be perceived as immense pressure and be able to show up authentically as yourself, calm, peaceful, and so that's the thing. The calm and the peace allows us to be authentic. It allows us to be ourselves in that moment more, because I'm not on the line. My ego is not on the line. I don't have to push back against something. I can show up, be myself. It's almost like I'm at the beach drinking a pina colada, but I'm standing in a World Cup final. Sorry. I felt like I had to just get it out there. I don't know if either of you have any comments on that. If not, then we can happily wrap up.
Yes,
Nkululeko.
yes, you're a champion. That's why I spoke about contracted awareness and then expanded awareness and the pure awareness. That when we have contracted awareness, we are actually operating out of fear and ego. So we think only within the box, the framework, But that with expanded awareness, it's slightly different. So with expanded awareness, we see the problem and then we try to solve the problem. So we try to resist the problem, which is where partly resilience comes from. And Russell himself once said something to me. He said that we want to enjoy pressure, but without feeling that there is pressure. That was very powerful. He said that, no, look, you, as an athlete, you want to love being under pressure without feeling it as pressure. So by just you feeling like, wow, I'm just being myself, I'm just expressing, I'm not impressing, Now, the last one of pure awareness, it's linked to that love that I spoke about. That because I love cricket, because I love my team, because I love my country, at pure awareness, there are no problems. You never see anything as a problem. And you never see something happening to you. It's just things happening around you, but they're not a problem. Because at that point, you have this belief, this knowledge that, look, who I am is enough. My skills are adequate enough to deal with a challenge. But if the conditions suit you and today it's your day, then I accept it as your destiny. That's when we are at true peace, is when we can accept the destiny. That's why I mentioned Tendulkar. He played international cricket for 25 years. So I want you to imagine how many World Cups he played up until he actually won the World Cup, his last, at the dawn of his career. You understand? So how many times did he have to accept that it was the destiny of Gilchrist and Hayden and Ponting to win the World Cup? And then the destiny of Sri Lanka with Arjuna Ranatunga and those guys in 1996. The destiny of Pakistan in 1992. So sometimes how do we create that environment where we appoint you as the coach and you come with us knowing that it doesn't insulate us from failure? We could have the best squad ever, and that still doesn't insulate us from not winning the World Cup. How do we create that environment? Because once we create that environment, it's an environment where there are no consequences. Therefore, there's no fear. You understand? Because consequences are not only physical. They can be a consequence of what people are going to think if you don't win. They can be a consequence of what people are going to think about me as a coach because I said that, look, I'm picking the squad to win the World Cup. But if we create that environment where, there are no consequences, you start to become more in acceptance instead of resistance or resilience. You understand what I'm saying? So it's about that thing, and it links up to what Russell says about opening up the merry-go-round. The problem with us in South Africa, we believe we are competing with each other. So I believe I'm competing with Jody for a particular job. Jody believes he's competing with Russell. And then Jody thinks he's competing with me because they have to see like Black Africans, right? But competition will always have comparison. Wherever there's competition, we're always going to compare each other. But listen to what I say now. The final product of all comparison is jealousy. So that's why, because of that, we are unable to expand the merry-go-round and bring each other along and make each other's jobs easier. We become too territorial. So I like what you said there about creating an environment where we can accept destiny.
Yeah. Russell?
I'm just going to make one final comment on what you said. I was actually in complete agreement with you. I just love the way you phrased it. So it was basically echoing my same sentiments. It basically alludes to the same thing when you come into that space of serenity or calmness and you can play from, right? It's also what Tom was talking about with his 3 A's. I know we're not going to unpack it now, but he talks about accept or acknowledge, accept, and then advance. But in order for you to advance, the spirit in which you advance there needs to be what you refer to now, right? If it's just a matter of just advancing for the sake of, I've acknowledged my flaws and failures, but I'm not capacitated with that inability to get to that prime state, I'm not going to be able to advance, right? So if you just have this knowledge of this is the 3-step process, it's not necessarily going to give you the outcome that you intended, right? The advancement. And so the spirit in which you've actually gone into that space and then played that master stroke, if you want to call it, to overcome, if it's not done from a pure space, what Mafinki was just talking about, then it becomes adulation, right? Another A. which means it's pointing back to you. Then you're going to have that brag swag about what you've just accomplished, right? Then you're not going to have that spirited way where you feel like you're inspiring others. You're actually going to feel like you created this monster egomania of a success, as opposed to coming from a purer space where you're actually adding value from this master expression for everyone who's seen it. So adulation is potentially the last step, really, if it's not done in the right spirit, and what you just referred to. So it's kind of like a nice complementary way of the way you explain. And this also highlights the benefit. I started something, you said something back, we retorted, my thinking addies, and then look at the beautiful wrapping up that can happen if you put heads together. And we've even included Tom's contribution of 3 A's to get us to that, including Paddy's from the podcast. So imagine we all sit together around this round table and get our heads together.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a lovely way to finish this conversation. Russell, thanks for being here. Well, thanks. Thank you very much. I will catch you all in the next one.
Cheers, man. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Cool. Awesome.
Lost my things there. I don't know where you happened to.
Yeah, his phone rang. His phone rang. I've also got to make a call. They want to know how I'm feeling. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No good.
I might want to have a chat with you about that one. I have 1 or 2 things that maybe just sit a bit uneasy with me through the conversation. Not got nothing to do with what you said or he said. It's more about what I said.
Oh, okay.
So I might want to just pick your brain on that. Yeah, so maybe let me make this phone call, then I'll maybe just phone you on WhatsApp if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. We're all good.
Okay. Perfect. Chat with you now.
Okay.
Cool. Cheers. Bye.
Here's my